Anil Dash. I'm the Chief Evangelist at 6 Apart, and I've been a blogger at dashes.com for about 10 years. No way. Blogging is one of those things where it's a little bit like asking who's the first rapper or, who invented rock and roll. You can always go back to somebody earlier, somebody newer. For me, I've been doing it, 10 or so years. I started maybe 1999. There's clearly people who influenced me who called what they were doing a weblog in 98, 97. I think, for me, Peter Merholtz, who does peterme.com, or Dave Weiner, who does scripting.com, those are influences. But, if you look at the traits of what we consider a blog, personal voice, uses the internet well, rich with links, edited by a real human with a human voice, those things, I think you go back to the very first web page. I think if you look at the first thing that Tim Berners-Lee posted when he, invented the web, or Mark Andreessen had that first page for the first browsers that would, later become Mozilla and Netscape. Those were, the Mosaic browser page in, the very birth of the web was really very similar in format and content to what a blog looks like today. 6 Apart's been an amazing journey for me. So the company's name comes from our co-founders, Ben and Mina Trott. They're a husband and wife couple whose birthdays are 6 days apart. And it's interesting because people always perceive it as being about 6 degrees of separation or something like that. And what I love instead is it's a real human story of two people who are, among my closest friends. They are this, this great, kind of cute young married couple with a, a little girl, like the kind of, American dream where they were high school sweethearts and the whole thing. And out of that has spun, the biggest blogging company in the world, arguably one of the biggest social media companies in the world. It's been tremendously influential. The things we're known for, I think, is creating blogging platforms like Movable Type and TypePad. And so when people go to the Huffington Post and at the bottom it says powered by Movable Type, or you go to barackobama.com or britneyspears.com and you see that they're using these tools, there's a lot of pride in that. And these days, the company does a lot more. We have a very successful services team here in New York that's helping all the biggest publishers in the world. We have an advertising team that's helping individual bloggers become more successful, so maybe they can do more reporting in their free time or cover their topic a little bit more passionately. But what I think has been amazing is going from when I joined Ben and Mina, it was 3 of us. It was literally in their spare bedroom, and that kind of almost prototypical story of a technology company of, you just have a belief beyond all rationality that what you're doing is important, and that back then a lot of people thought blogs were a fad, that it was going to be like CB radio and it would go away. They certainly never thought you would go to whitehouse.gov and the White House website would have a blog on it. And some small part of the reason why that's true, or why so much of what we read for fun is from blogs, is because of the work that 6 Apart has done. So it's been, the most gratifying experience of my professional career to have a hand in helping start this thing, and to see literally hundreds of people join the company as employees, working like crazy, and millions of people work with the tools and the technologies we create and have it impact their lives. There's very few chances in your life you ever get to do something like that. It's been really exciting. The process of creativity on the web, I think, is a little bit different than in other media. I think in the kind of fine arts, it's something where an artist goes away to their, their cave, or the writer has writer's block, and you picture them, kind of huddled up in the attic with the typewriter. And by necessity, creating things for the web is a social behavior. We call it social software, or we talk about social networks. That means it is intrinsically collaborative. And that's true even if you're one person hacking away at a computer in the middle of the night. You are always thinking of what other people want, what other people do, what their behaviors are. There's always a dialogue implicit in what you create. And that might be new. We've had artists that work in film and in TV, and they're obviously thinking of an audience. But they aren't necessarily thinking of it as an iterative process. Very few films go out to theatrical release, come back, get feedback, and change what they did in the film for a second release. With software, that happens every single day on the web, and it's a thrill. I love talking to groups of people. I love talking to our customers and users, or the people that read my blog, and that idea of instead of throwing a sculpture out to you, I'm going to throw a lump of clay out to you all, and you're going to shape it. I'm going to take it back and respond to that. I've had a lot of people over the years ask me to write a book, and I felt like, one, everybody I know that writes a certain kind of book, they know they're not going to make any money with it. It's certainly not for that. They want to have it on their resume, and they want to have the chance to go and talk about it and do a book tour. And I get frustrated because I think, well, why can't I do a blog tour? You know, over the years, I've probably written 10 books worth of text on my blog, and yet it doesn't open the doors. Nobody ever goes on a late night talk show to talk about the new blog they launched. And so I think there's been a real reckoning where you have to wonder if you're going to put your principles into play. So that I believe the best way to share an idea right now, to get an idea out in the popular culture, is to have a dialogue about it on the web with the people that are most informed about it. And I think 20 years ago, the best way to get an idea out in the culture was to write a lengthy book about it and hope that people talked about the book and shared the idea. And so I think a book is an artifact of a person's ambition in their career. I think if you're Malcolm Gladwell or Chris Anderson, you can make some money with it, but most people don't. And so after a while, it's kind of saying, well, do I want to prop up a system that says a book is the only way to get an idea into popular discussion? Do I want to make sure that the best ideas are happening on the web, which is the medium that I care about and that has been most generous to me? You know, the publishing industry has not built my career, and the web industry has. So I kind of want to honor where I came from. So I think I have a book in me. I have a book's worth of information to share. Do I have to kill trees to get that idea out there? I hope not. I think blogging has changed tremendously over the past decade. One, we didn't really think of it consciously as something that would be quite so pervasive, quite so influential. So early on, when I started reading blogs, I felt like everybody in the community, a few dozen of us, all read every other blog every day. That'd be a little hard to do when the other 100 million or so show up to think, gosh, this is a little bit more than we can read. But there was a very, very strong sense of community, and what came from that was the same feeling I have being in the East Village here in New York, where I live, and saying, I know who my neighbors are. I know, maybe I don't know this person well, but their face is familiar to me, and in the same way their voice is familiar. And so your norms for a community that size are really very thoughtful. They're very, very considerate. And, blogging, somewhat to my dismay, has gotten a reputation as being a free-for-all. And people can say anything, do anything. They're really unkind in the comments a lot of times. And those are because as newer sites came along or newer bloggers came along, they hadn't quite learned the lessons that you get after 5 years, 10 years of blogging, which are that you really want to make sure you have a human connection between the readers of your site, between you as a blogger and your readers. And if you do those things, you can preserve the best elements of it. So I think we've lost a little bit of the personal connection, as certainly the biggest blogs have been the ones that define people's perception of the medium. And those are essentially just more broadcast or large-scale publishers, just like TV and radio and newspapers were. It was hard for them to keep a relationship with their readers. I think there's a lot of conversations where journalists say, what do we do about the authenticity problem? How do we confront it? I think the fact that that when I'm in the journalism world, it's described as a problem is very telling, right? And I think the reality is humans are very, very well wired to evaluate the credibility of a source of information all the time. We do it night and day. And there was this pretense for a long time, when journalism was primarily a mass market endeavor, that you had to defend your credibility at all times and that nobody would know what your bias was if you sufficiently hid it. And the thing is, we've always known. We've always been able to see through that. And so, I think step one was acknowledging how much people wanted a real human voice, that they would be their own judge as to whether there was a bias there and what the background was. And then the question of credibility comes up all the time. What about if something, that CNN reads on air from Twitter isn't true? Then it gets corrected, and that's okay. As it turns out, a lot of what gets reported gets corrected later. I wish that they got it right the first take every time, both in blogs or on TV or in newspapers or whatever. But the reality is we don't know what something means right away. So the immediate reporting of a fact is only one step to figuring out what the truth is. And the analysis that comes later is necessary to do that. And if some of those initial facts are fuzzy or incorrect, or even a lie, a deliberate act of deception, that actually happens all the time. You know, I can think of a million political examples where what somebody's saying is actually the opposite of what they're doing. I think a lot of people ask, you know, is blogging over? Has it run its course? Is this new thing cooler, if that's Facebook or Twitter? You will know blogging has truly succeeded when it becomes invisible. And I think about this a lot with, you know, phone calls. I get introduced still at events as, oh, he's a blogger. And it feels a little bit like being introduced as an emailer, you know, or a phone caller. It's like, these are things we do every day. You don't think about them as a conscious act. It's just part of what you do to communicate with the world. We're still a few years away from everybody realizing that every time they take a phone camera picture and they post it up somewhere, they are acting as a blogger. Every time you jot down a couple notes online and share them with your friends, check out this link, that is blogging. And, you know, it doesn't have to go by that name to be that important act of documenting what you think matters to you. That fundamental act of connecting and sharing and building a relationship with someone around the things you share with them. Those are empowering in a way that, you know, when I used to work in television or the music industry, I never could have made a show on my own. I never could have made an album on my own. I never could have made a film on my own. But a blog I can do entirely by myself and have as the creative document of what I've done. That impulse will never go away. There will always be somebody that has something to say that says, I just want to do it on myself, all by myself, and get my word out there. And the fact that people think that's possible, that I talk to young people and they say, you know, I say, what can you do with a book? And they're like, oh, you can read it, you can put a cover on it, you can put it on a shelf. And I say, what can you do with the web? And they say, I can make it, I can create it. That is the fundamental difference that blogging brought about. As long as that's true and people feel like that is a place that they can create and express themselves, blogging is fine, whether the name is there or not. People ask a lot about, is the web bringing us together or taking us apart? I think culture has changed to the point where shared experience is much less common. You know, as we talk today, it's very close to the 40th anniversary of the landing on the moon, and that was one of the definitive universal experiences around the world. Everybody had that experience, whether it was on TV, radio, newspaper. There was a moment we all shared. Those are fewer and fewer. We place a priority saying it's more human or personal to call our moms than to chat with them on instant messenger. I don't know why we feel that way. They're just different. Well, you know, we go the other extreme. We said, well, a handwritten letter is the most personal. Well, that doesn't feel as personal as a phone call to me. But that's supposed to be something valuable because it's permanent. Well, what if she permanently archives an instant messenger conversation? Does that go back to being human again? Like, these things are artifacts of our moment in history. We are trained to teach that something new is inhumane and personal and computerish and, you know, technical and sterile, and everything old is warm and analog and expressive. And I don't feel that way. I don't feel, you know, I have emails that I cherish and value, and I wish that we created technologies that honored that. You know, I don't want to throw away all my SMSs when I get a new phone. I want to save those somewhere. But if done right, these technologies are designed to help us communicate with people we otherwise wouldn't be able to, with people we didn't know we had something in common with. They can help us discover a commonality. They haven't been architected to create shared experiences very well, so we're losing a lot of our cultural touchstones of something that everybody knows, a song everybody knows the words to, or, you know, a video everybody's seen. But they've done a good job of all of us saying, oh, I saw this funny YouTube video and I passed it along. And that is shared experience as much as millions of people sitting around watching, you know, the finale of MASH was, you know, decades ago, or watching the Super Bowl for its ads. So I think done right, these technologies bring us together. The web is a tool for connections. That's what it's designed to be. I think the fact that a lot of people don't feel that way has been because the first attempts at a lot of social networks or social software on the web have been created by people that are bad at building relationships, both personally and as architects of communities. But we can fix that. You know, the first decade of the web was pretty bad at that, but we're getting better at making real connections online. And I think when it reaches its potential, the web will bind us together in ways that television never could, that will make a phone or a handwritten letter seem as, rudimentary as they were. The lolcats are really interesting for a lot of reasons. I love language, and I love the image that people have of the internet being a place where you go to see cat pictures. And from a bunch of different web communities, such as 4chan and some of the other kind of underground web communities, people were captioning cats with text about what they thought the cats would be saying. And it's kind of a funny little shtick. Like you have a cat, and cats are great fodder for the web because everybody, I have a cat. Like that they're kind of evil on the inside, but they're also kind of hapless. And that combination of like really diabolical but not able to do anything about it is really great fodder. And then all of the captions kind of followed a pattern for how people were doing the grammar or the speech of these presumable cats talking. And so I kind of just made an observation. This is really consistent. This is how language forms. And I'm very fortunate. I have a number of friends that are linguists or that help create dictionaries, and so they know a lot about etymology and how language develops. And I said, is this something like a pidgin language? And they're like, no, this is more of a Creole. And a Creole is what one group of one language uses to kind of adapt their language so another group can understand it. And I said, this is the language that cats are speaking in, hoping that humans will understand them. And so that idea of taking these cat pictures, lolcats, so seriously, I think really take a lot of people's fancy. It might be the most popular thing I've ever written. I've been blogging 10 years, and I wrote about lolcats. And I tell you, I can go anywhere in the country, almost anywhere in the world, and if I'm in a group of people that know me professionally, and the first few minutes somebody will bring up lolcats. And if you got to be known for cat pictures on the web, that at least it's the smart take on cat pictures on the web. I love it. I love the web's culture. I love how inventive people are and coming up with new stuff, and they have fun with it and keep remixing it. I hope that never ends. No, so I've had some fun over the years online, usually taking some little obscure element of web culture or geek culture and kind of taking it to the outsiders and having some fun with it. I think I'm not at all embarrassed about it. Like, I like to have fun. I think you have to have a sense of humor. You can't take yourself too seriously. I fear, though, one of the things I did, there's an offensive website on the web called Goatsy that a lot of geeks know. It's a picture you literally don't want to look directly at. But somebody made a non-offensive T-shirt about it. It was just kind of a joke. And one of the classic things you used to do on the web 5 or 10 years ago was you would send somebody a link to this image, and they would click on it before they realized it, and then they would yell at you for doing that to them. It was just kind of a harmless prank. A lot like what Rickrolling became later, although Rick Astley is nowhere near as offensive. And so, I had a shirt that had this logo for it on it, and when the New York Times wanted to do a story about presenting your reputation online, I wore the shirt for their photo of me for the story. And it was one of those things where I knew everybody on the web would get it. I knew the Times probably wouldn't. Maybe these days they would, but back then they didn't. And so it was a lot of fun. What I fear is, people look at Wikipedia and the first couple Google results to decide who you are. And I think, someday, 50 years from now, I'll die. And they'll say, what should we put on this guy's tombstone? It's going to be, well, he wore an offensive T-shirt. He wrote about lolcats. Like, there's no, there were more substantive things I've done in my career, but they tend to get overshadowed by the really fun ones. I think there's worse things to be thought of than somebody that likes a good joke. The key to successful blogging. Some good friends. I remember reading a fellow, John Gruber, who's a friend of mine, who has a site called Daring Fireball, and they were saying kind of obsessions and passion were two necessary items. And I think a lot of my favorite blogs are those things. Somebody loves something irrationally, beyond the point of all, sanity, and just wants to own that topic. And when somebody has that kind of passion for what they love, it can be interesting to you even if you otherwise wouldn't have been interested in the topic. And I think that's really fascinating. So some of the single subject blogs that I've seen that are amazing, I saw one the other day. It was just about album covers from back in the old 12-inch vinyl days. And they took record covers and they cover one at a time, and they talk about who the photographer was, who the art director was, what the impact of that album cover was. And it can be about a record that I've never heard, and even a group I've never even heard of. And they can tell a story about these album covers and what it meant to them and why it's important that makes it compelling to you. That's mesmerizing to me. I think those are the great, truly great blogs, as somebody that has a passion beyond all rationality and is so excited about it that you can't help but be excited too. And I think it's a little bit of a bittersweet thing that the blogs people discover first are essentially, news or pop culture or sports, which are things that we've had in, media about for years. And those are good. They're fine. I read them. I think they're important. But it's always that personal blog that is somebody just telling you about their passion, their hobby, their area of expertise, the thing that they know better than anybody else in the world. Those people are the best bloggers in the world to me. A lot of times people think getting your company or your individual ideas visible on the web involves a lot of tricks. There's a whole industry called search engine optimization, or SEO. And a lot of it's legitimate. It's people doing consulting for, trying to get information discoverable on the web. And a lot of it is snake oil salespeople. They feel like Google is this angry volcano monster, and maybe if we throw a goat in there, it'll help. They just have no idea whether what they're doing has any science behind it at all. And as it turns out, the fundamental principles are really, really easy. If you want to get a message out on the web effectively, frequently update your content. Make sure that and a blog is great for this. I'm biased because I love blogging, but use any kind of system that lets you frequently update your content is going to make sure your information is current, that it's up to date, and it's also going to let people know that you are committed to communicating with them over time. So frequently updated content, have it be well written, well designed, well presented. Those sound like little things, but the way information looks and how readable and discoverable it is makes a big difference as to whether people want to share it. And all of the search engines or all the other systems people use to discover content are built around links. Whether it's people sharing a link in Facebook or posting a link on their blog, those are the currency by which people discover things on the web. And you earn a link. It's not the kind of thing where you should be paying somebody to post links to what you do. You earn a link by having something compelling and unique that people feel like they want to share. And that gets to the last point, which is building a relationship. The best way to get a really big site to link to your content, or to get a really, somebody with a lot of reach to help amplify your message on the web, is to build a relationship with them that is real. Think about what they want, not just when you're asking them to do you a favor, and reciprocate when they've created something that's worth sharing. Share what they do as well. And if you follow those principles of updating frequently, have something that's worth reading, have it be well presented, and build relationships with others that want to amplify your message, you don't need to worry about any of the tricks for the search engines or anything else. Everything flows from that. And I've been very fortunate. I've been writing a lot lately, and on my blog for 10 years, and people have said, gosh, you get a lot of links, and people, you rank first in Google for your name, and those things happen because you have built up a reputation and relationships over time that people want to honor by amplifying your message for you. Yeah, I think, I've had the privilege to work with a lot of the best bloggers in the world, and they're all making money one way or another. They have advertising on their site, or they use it to get, speaking gigs, or for people to pay for them to consult. It's not always direct, but every door that I've ever had open in my entire career has happened because of my blog. So I could trace back every dollar I've ever earned to being because of my blog, certainly since I've been blogging, right? I think it's really counterintuitive for people to think that the thing they do that generates that so much value isn't necessarily where they get the direct dollars from. But there are people that have information that is super valuable that people would pay to subscribe to their blog. So I think there's a lot of different paths to it. What you have to think about is total earnings versus total effort, and recognize that they won't always correspond one-to-one. And that's true of the entire economy. I mean, I think you look at what Chris Anderson's writing in Free, what the fellows that are writing in Freakonomics are writing, and Super Freakonomics. There's a lot of these ideas that are being covered that are saying you can create a lot of value over here, maybe not get direct compensation for it, and get a lot of reward over here, and just make sure you know how that flow happens, but it doesn't have to be a one-to-one exchange that where you put in the most effort is where you get the most reward. That's a good one. I think new media is at a crossroads where we are no longer about technology, we're about culture. And that means we have to listen to those that create and lead culture. That can be artists, that can be academics, that can be those in government and politics and in the civic sector. But it is no longer the realm of those that know computer programming and those that know how to use the hardware the best. Like that moment is over, and technologists are going to be reluctant to let go of that. Those of us that know technology get very full of ourselves and say, "Oh, this means I'm a wizard, I'm an expert." The way they talk about technology is like it's magic. But our responsibility now is to building a culture that is supportive of people expressing themselves, that's inclusive of those that don't have access to the latest technology, don't have the resources to spend a lot of time learning it. And so what we're faced with now in the world of new media is making sure we're creating environments that everybody can participate in, and making sure we're encouraging a culture of inclusion. And frankly, we haven't been that good at it. If you go and look around the world of new media right now, they will tell you that everybody has a $500 smartphone. And I can tell you that's not everybody, Or they'll tell you, oh, everybody knows how to use a web browser, everybody has email. And those things are barely even true. They're common, certainly, and people that want to learn them have at least a way to learn them, but they don't know the potential of them yet. So I think the real innovations that are going to happen in new media are going to be about bringing that cutting edge, really broad set of tools that we have. The fanciest trick you could do in Photoshop, the most advanced video editing tool, bringing it down to a level that anybody can do it. And do it within their means, within the resources they have. Those are going to bring about the real revolution. So it's going to be access, not invention. And that is a huge cultural change for Silicon Valley, for the whole tech world, to think instead of what's new, what's really, truly broadly available. And people will unlock that. They'll figure that secret out, hopefully, and hopefully soon. I can't wait to see that happen. I think there's an enormous challenge in using today's technologies to reach the developing world, to reach rural communities in the U.S. And part of it is it requires cultural change from those developing the technologies. We don't realize the cultural assumptions we make. When we make what we think are features in software, we're actually defining culture. And there's a million examples of this. One I always point to is, for many years, Facebook had "it's complicated" as a relationship choice, how you could define your relationship with someone. And in most of the rest of the world, I think of, certainly any Islamic country, the idea that you would define your relationship with somebody as "it's complicated" would say a lot about you and that other person that maybe you don't want to say, right? And so your software is reflecting a social value that is certainly not universal, and it's not universal within our own culture. There's a lot of people that would think it's anathema to build into your application the idea that you might have random hookups with other people as a form of a relationship. And so when you make assumptions like that, you stop a technology from being useful in the developing world even before they've looked at what its utility is. Right from the beginning, you've said this is not for you, this is not your tool to use. And so those are the fundamental issues that have to be addressed. Are we assuming that these tools can be used appropriately? And I think then there's the logistical issues. The fact that the phone is a primary interface for what we think of as the web or the internet here in the US. For the rest of the world, it's happening on a handset. I think you have the issues of shared computers, right? We talk about one laptop per child and things like that, and I think it's much more likely one internet kiosk per village, or 1 hour slot at an internet cafe per week. Those are the ways that technology gets used in the rest of the world, if it gets used at all. And thinking about really rapid access for a few minutes a week because it costs a lot of money to use an internet cafe radically changes what you want an application to be able to do, what you want a technology to be able to do. So there's tremendous potential. I think there's people that have, stars in their eyes right now about, I'm going to use Twitter to deliver crop reports to someone in the developing world that's going to improve, their ability to go to market. I think those things are great. I hope they happen. But before we can even think about those things, we have to think about truly respecting and understanding the cultures that are going to be using these technologies and building for the assumptions and the social, constraints that they'll be using these technologies within. I do think we're at an inflection point about immediacy. The big triumph for me about blogging was the idea of permanence, that you would, well, they call it a permanent link. If you look at the bottom of a lot of blog posts, they'll say permalink, and it's permanent link for that information. The idea that I'm going to create information that will live on through time and get more valuable, hopefully, over time, is pretty important. And then the next step is immediacy. Like, can I do things in real time? And Twitter has taught a lot of people about this. To some degree, Facebook has taught people about this. Or going back 10 or 15 years ago, instant messaging took off and taught people about immediacy. I think it's still been fairly constrained. It's been hard to immediately publish to a large number of people, to immediately share context or content with a lot of people. And I think there's been a challenge as to filtering. If there's a constant flow of real-time information, how do you not get overwhelmed? And I look at, CNN, and there's 3 different things crawling across the screen and 2 people on screen yelling at each other and a logo up in the corner, and I think if this is what real-time means, this is overwhelming. So that's going to be, a challenge to solve the presentation of large amounts of information in real time. But that idea of immediately and easily being able to share with any number of people, that seems really exciting. That seems like that might be, if not the next big thing, then part of the next big thing.